Hey guys, tonight we're going to slip quietly through the shadows of ancient Ur, one of the first great cities on Earth, to uncover a story so delightfully mundane it helped invent civilization itself. Picture this warm night air settles over clay brick rooftops. The Euphrates gurgles softly nearby, and lamplight flickers inside a dusty courtyard where a scribe hunched and yawning gently presses symbols into wet clay. He's not penning poetry or proclaiming royal laws. No, he's itemizing a list of sheep delivered 2 days late. You're here to witness the invention of the receipt. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop your location and what time it is right now in the comments. I love seeing where you're all tuning in from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge through a narrow alley in Ur, brushing against rough walls of baked mud brick, still warm from the day's sun. There's a soft splat as your sandal finds a patch of damp clay, likely from the neighbor's bathwater jug. It's somewhere around 2200 BCE, give or take a few hundred years, and the city is alive in the sleepy way only truly ancient cities are. Goats bleat half-heartedly in rooftop pens. A child somewhere whimpers in their sleep, and behind a woven reed door, someone coughs dramatically for attention. You pass under an arch of woven reeds and step into a courtyard lit by a single oil lamp. A low table is scattered with clay tablets, smudged styluses, and a bowl of figs that no one seems interested in eating. At the table sits a scribe, bare-chested, his hair curled with sweat, eyes red from a long day of counting. He grumbles as he etches symbols into clay wedges for numbers, little pictographs for goods. 3 sheep, 2 baskets of barley, and 1 mildly suspicious chicken. He's not writing for fun. He's documenting a transaction between temple administrators and a merchant who claims his ox broke down on the road. You glance at the tablet. It's a receipt, perhaps not unlike the crumpled one in your own bag from that questionable smoothie you got this morning. Receipts in Mesopotamia were serious business. In a world where nothing was printed, no one trusted memory, and almost everything food labor land was managed by priests or palace agents, writing it down meant power. The scribe's clay tablet is both a record and a shield. This is what was delivered, it says. Don't try to argue later. You settle onto a mat in the corner and listen to the soft squelch of stylus on clay. The scribe mutters the numbers as he writes part habit, part defense against sleep. 3 sheep? Yes. No, wait, 4. 1 ran off but came back. Or maybe that was a different delivery. He frowns and sighs. Historians still argue whether scribes like him were merely record keepers or something more, gatekeepers of memory tools of control, maybe even early bureaucratic visionaries. But tonight, under the hum of cicadas, he's just a tired guy trying to not get yelled at by the temple steward. Outside, the city murmurs. Ur isn't just any town. It's a thriving hub, complete with ziggurats that pierce the dusty sky canals, filled with barges of barley, and enough administrative paperwork on clay, of course, to make a modern accountant break into a cold sweat. It's not flashy, it's not dramatic, but it's real. And as you drift deeper into the courtyard's sleepy rhythm, you realize something. For all our modern tech, we're still dealing with the same things: lost packages, questionable quantities, and that one guy who always forgets to sign The scribe finishes the tablet and sighs. He carefully folds a damp cloth over it to keep it from cracking overnight. It will go into the archives tomorrow, tucked into rows of other tablets, thousands of them, each one a sleepy testament to how society somehow keeps moving forward. You lie back, letting the warm air wrap around you. The lamp flickers. The scribe, perhaps satisfied, finally leans back and closes his eyes. Outside, somewhere near the temple, a priest drops a jug of wine with a wet thunk. A dog barks once, then silence, and that's how it begins. Civilization didn't start with a bang or a battle. It started with someone writing 3 sheep on a bit of clay and hoping the other guy wouldn't argue about it later. You wake well, you almost wake to the gentle rhythm of sandals squishing through clay streets. The sun is barely up, and a low haze hangs over Ur like a warm blanket that refuses to be shaken off. Somewhere nearby, someone is already yelling about a shipment of onions. But you're not worried about onions. You're curious about something smaller, much smaller. Before receipts were scratched onto clay tablets, before the very idea of writing words was born, people were counting and recording in ways that were frankly adorable. You follow a sleepy apprentice down an alley to a tiny side room filled with baskets and little clay shapes, tokens no bigger than dried beans. They're everywhere, piled in bowls tied in little string pouches, even stuck into fresh bread like some kind of ancient fortune cookie system. This, dear traveler, is the pre-receipt world. Back around 8000 BCE, yes, you're going that far, back people in the Fertile Crescent started using these clay tokens to represent goods. A cone might mean a small measure of grain. A sphere could stand for a sheep. A cylinder might mean a jar of oil. Each shape had a meaning, and no, there was no emoji guide. You had to know what the blob meant. Imagine your grocery run involves handing over 5 spheres and 3 cones to a priest behind a stone counter. He squints at them, nods solemnly, and throws them in a pot. That's accounting, baby. Now here's the quirky bit. When transactions got more complicated, people started putting the tokens into hollow clay balls called bully. Think of them as ancient piggy banks sealed shut. On the outside, they'd press symbols showing what was inside so you didn't have to smash it unless someone got suspicious. This method gave rise to a momentous innovation: symbols representing numbers outside the container. Historians still argue whether this was the first step toward writing itself or just a clever way to avoid constant breakage. But either way, it's brilliant. It's also the reason that one day someone finally said, "Why are we putting the tokens inside at all? Let's just write the symbols." But for now, you're still in the token age. The apprentice gestures for you to sit by a tray of little shapes. She hands you a squishy ball of clay and motions for you to mold it into a triangle. You fail badly. It turns out these early accountants weren't just bean counters. They were artisans in their own right. Every token had to be uniform, recognizable, and resistant to damage. The senior record keeper, a woman with silver hair and more necklaces than strictly necessary, snorts gently as you fumble. "New hire?" she asks, raising an eyebrow. You nod sheepishly. She goes back to counting goats, using a mix of tokens and muttered curses about unreliable herders. This room might seem modest, but it's a revolution in real time. These tokens let communities grow beyond barter. They allow temples to track who owes what, when, and how often. And most importantly, they help people remember. Because oral memory, charming as it is, tends to forget whether that basket of dates was paid for or definitely coming tomorrow. There's a bowl in the corner filled with worn-out tokens, edges rubbed down from too much handling. The clay here is precious, reused until the meaning crumbles. You pick one up. It feels like a secret, a little whisper from a world trying desperately to organize itself. And here's the kicker: these systems were standardized. Across different villages, the same token shapes meant the same things. That implies trade networks, shared practices, maybe even traveling auditors, with satchels full of tiny clay sheep. Historians still debate how widespread these tokens became and whether they functioned independently or always tied into oral agreements. Were they symbolic, or did they carry legal force? Either way, you realize you're holding a bit of bureaucratic DNA, the ancestor of every shopping receipt, tax form, and office memo you've ever sighed at. As the sun lifts higher, the room grows warmer. A pigeon coos lazily from the windowsill. The apprentice yawns and starts sorting tokens for the day's deliveries. You rise quietly and leave her to her work, stepping into the growing hum of the city outside. Someone calls out prices at a fish stall. A boy chases a runaway piglet through the mud. You hear the rattle of a cart and the mutter of numbers. Everywhere you look, life is moving, trading, recording, forgetting, remembering. And behind it all, tiny bits of clay silently keeping score. You walk slowly now, the warmth rising off the stones beneath your feet. The smell of dust and damp reeds hangs in the air along with something vaguely nutty, probably barley gruel cooking in a communal pot nearby. You round a corner and find yourself facing a wide, low structure made of baked brick. Its massive doors are carved wood, reinforced with copper studs, and guarded by a bored teenager with an oversized staff and no particular interest in using it. This is no palace. It's a temple granary part, warehouse part, religious center, part accounting office, and entirely essential to how this city functions. You shuffle inside. It's dim in here, but cooler. The light filters through slatted windows, casting stripes across stacked baskets of barley-dried figs wool and the occasional jug of beer sealed with a plug of resin. You hear the steady clack of stylus on clay before you see the scribes. Rows of them, some young, some older, all with arched backs and dusty fingers, sit at low benches in front of mounds of soft clay tablets, carefully noting every movement of goods into and out of the temple's storerooms. You watch as a transaction unfolds. A herder arrives sweaty and sunburned, tugging behind him a pair of reluctant sheep. He speaks to a steward who nods and gestures to a scribe. The scribe doesn't look up. He just reaches for a slab of fresh clay, flattens it with his palm, and begins. Symbols for sheep, a number, a name. The stylus tap, tap, taps like rain on a windowsill. This is where receipts start getting official. See, temples weren't just religious hubs. They were Mesopotamia's first economic engines. They owned land-employed workers, organized festivals, fed the poor, and kept the city's economy humming. They also hoarded grain like a doomsday prepper with a particularly aggressive spreadsheet. That grain wasn't just food, it was currency. Wages were paid in barley rations, taxes collected as jars of oil, and temple workers compensated with precisely weighed measures of beer. The barley basket was the pay stub of the day, and if you wanted proof you'd paid your dues or delivered your quota, you needed a receipt. Historians still argue whether temples were benevolent socialist engines or the world's first megacorporations with spiritual branding. But one thing is clear: if you didn't get your transactions recorded properly, you were going to be very hungry very soon. You follow a clay tablet's journey from soft lump to archived record. After it's written, it's dried in the sun, then stored in a cubbyhole labeled with a symbol or name. Some temples employed actual librarians to manage their growing collection of receipts, contracts, and ledgers. These weren't private records, they were institutional memory, which meant if you claimed your ox was stolen before you made your delivery, someone could check and then charge you for the ox and the missed delivery. Naturally, there were workarounds. The temple scribe next to you, a wiry man with ink-stained fingernails and a suspicious twinkle in his eye, tells you without looking up that it's not unheard of to misplace a tablet if a small favor is exchanged. You glance at the basket of dried figs in the corner. You walk through rows of grain jars stamped with the temple's seal. Everything here has a mark either pressed into clay or rolled with a cylinder seal. Even the sheep look like they'd come with barcodes if they could. The obsession with tracking wasn't just about order. It was about control, about knowing who owed what and who was owed. There's something oddly comforting in this tidy system. It's familiar, a workplace rhythm not so different from a modern warehouse or an office cubicle farm, minus the coffee and Wi-Fi. The scribe hums under his breath as he works. A child chases a stray chicken between barrels. You hear someone grumbling about a miscounted barley jar. Some things never change. The priest steward passes by, nodding to you. He carries a tall staff and wears a beaded robe that rustles as he walks. But his arms are full of ledgers, tablets. You imagine him staying up late, squinting by lamplight, muttering, "Where's the tablet for the fish shipment again?" while his assistant pretends not to hear. One of the scribes calls out, waving a tablet. It's cracked. It's also forged. Someone tried to pass off a fake delivery receipt, probably hoping the overseer wouldn't notice. The room buzzes for a moment. This apparently is very exciting. Fraud is as old as trade itself. You can almost hear the modern echoes. "Sorry, our records don't show that return, sir. Let me speak to your manager." But here the receipt was literal clay, durable, heavy, and occasionally thrown at people in frustration. You rest on a bench at the back of the room and watch the light shift on the walls. The scribes never stop. The styluses keep tapping. The goods keep moving. And somewhere in the shadows of this temple warehouse, buried beneath the barley and the ledgers and the quiet politics of priest accountants, the humble receipt begins to evolve from a token to a tablet, from a symbol to a sentence. You leave the temple warehouse behind and make your way through the main avenue of Ur. It's a slow-moving sort of chaos, children weaving between carts, donkeys braying with the self-importance of minor gods, and vendors shouting about pomegranates like their lives depend on it. You dodge a basket of fish that smells more historical than fresh and turn down a quieter path. Ahead, a schoolroom, or to be more precise and Adubba, a tablet house. That's right. Mesopotamia had schools, and no, they weren't for the faint of heart. You duck through the doorway and find yourself in a cramped, sunlit room filled with groaning boys and very little enthusiasm. Welcome to scribe school. You settle into a shadowed corner, careful not to disturb the chalky clay dust coating every surface. A teacher wrinkled and possibly immortal paces with a reed stylus behind his back. He's muttering about verb forms and grain calculations. The students sit cross-legged, each with a flattened square of clay and a bundle of styluses tied with string like some very bureaucratic makeup brush kit. Here, writing isn't about poetry or philosophy, it's about math. Specifically, it's about recording quantities, values units of measurement, and every grueling permutation of ancient decimal and sexagesimal number systems you can imagine. Want to be a poet? Tough. Learn to subtract sheep first. These students aren't preparing to write epics. They're training to become the city's financial lifeblood professional recorders of transactions, trades, debts, and deliveries, the accountants of the ancient world. And to do that, they need to master the art of the receipt. The clay tablets in front of them are rough and pocked. Some have faded lines from previous practice. Others bear uneven wedges from unsteady hands. You watch as one boy clumsily presses the symbol for barley followed by P1, then immediately smears it with his elbow. The teacher sighs so deeply, you wonder if he's reconsidering every life choice that led him to this room. It's here in these tablet houses that receipts take a giant leap forward from mere item records to actual contract language. The students are learning standard phrases. So-and-so delivered 2 goats to such and such on the 3rd day of the waxing moon. The wording is formulaic like a fill-in-the-blank sentence starter kit. But it works. And that structure becomes the foundation of written administration for the next several thousand years. Historians still debate how widespread literacy really was, whether these adubas were rare elite enclaves or relatively common in big cities. But either way, the effect is the same. The power of writing is placed in the hands of the few who can master it, and those few wield it like a chisel in wet cement. The teacher pauses to inspect a student's work. He frowns, then takes the tablet and smacks it gently but firmly on the boy's head before wiping it clean. The student grimaces. You can't help but chuckle. Ancient education, equal parts repetition, and mild clay-based violence. Here's a fringe tidbit that might amuse you. Some surviving tablets contain complaints, yes, complaints, about unfair grades, missing lunches, or even boredom. One sassy student wrote a line that scholars translate roughly as "the teacher made me write this 20 times. What an idiot. The ancient world wasn't all solemn prayer and taxation. Sometimes it was just kids being kids. You notice a shelf near the wall stacked with hardened practice tablets. Some are neatly inscribed, others hopelessly crooked. The difference between a good scribe and a bad one could be the difference between getting paid or mysteriously forgetting your delivery happened. That's why receipts had to be uniform readable and where possible sealed. Ah yes, seals. The fingerprint of the bureaucratic soul. The teacher brings out a collection of tiny carved cylinders, each one a work of art. They're made from stone, glass, even bone, and when rolled over fresh clay, they leave a unique design. A merchant might have a lion. A priest might have a pattern of stars and gods. Some seals include names, others just pictures. Once your receipt was written, you'd roll your seal over it, your guarantee that it was legit. Forgery wasn't impossible, but it was hard and risky. That seal impression could make or break a case. You imagine two angry traders squabbling over a delivery gone wrong, each waving clay slabs and seal rolls insisting they were in the right. Babylonian Judge Judy probably saw a lot of that. The room quiets. One student successfully completes a full receipt sentence without error. The others groan. The teacher lets out a small humph that could almost be pride. Almost. You slip out of the tablet house, blinking in the bright sun. The noise of the street returns like a tide. But something's changed. You're starting to see the receipts everywhere now. In the bustle of trade, in the records clutched by scribes, in the tight-fisted pride of a temple clerk showing off their cylinder seal. These little documents aren't just evidence. They're power, memory, protection. They say, I was here. I gave what I owed. I am not to be messed with. Not bad for a bit of squished mud, huh? You step back into the street with your sandals dusted and your head filled with wedges and barley counts. But before you wander too far, someone waves you down, a merchant, broad-shouldered with a sun-lined face and a grin that suggests he's haggled his way through every market from here to Elam. He's standing beside a cart full of date cakes and clay jars, each marked with a symbol you recognize now, seals. You've stumbled into one of Mesopotamia's earliest open-air trading hubs, and this man is eager to show off his wares and his paperwork. He beckons you forward and holds up a small dry tablet. It's cracked at one edge, but the symbols are clear. His name, the name of his buyer, the items traded, and most curiously, the agreed-upon method of delivery. The Mesopotamians, it turns out, were no strangers to deferred payments and shipping delays. The merchant explains with a dramatic roll of the eyes that his buyer promised 2 baskets of lentils in return to be delivered by the 3rd moon. You glance at the tablet. Yep, there it is, immortalized in clay payment pending, the original invoice. You chuckle. Deferred payment terms in 2400 BCE. Who knew? This tablet isn't unique. In fact, you begin to realize receipts weren't only about physical goods exchanged on the spot. Many represented future arrangements, promises, debts, and credits. That means ancient receipts weren't just records. They were early contracts complete with clauses, conditions, and yes, probably some very fine print if they'd had paper small enough for it. You begin walking with the merchant, listening as he explains the growing complexity of trade. Barley might be the standard, but it's not the only thing on the menu. Honey oil copper tools, woven cloth livestock, each with its own value-weight conversions and logistical headaches. Historians still argue whether this marks the birth of proto-capitalism or something fuzzier, an organized barter economy with strong communal underpinnings. Either way, one thing's clear: nobody trusted memory alone. Clay didn't forget. The merchant tells you about a particular transaction he once witnessed involving 3 donkeys, a ceremonial robe, and a batch of dried river fish. The trade spanned 3 towns, 5 couriers, and naturally 7 receipts, all because someone refused to deliver without proof of initial shipment. You try to imagine the Mesopotamian version of a lost tracking number. Yes, sir, your robe was last seen entering Lagash, we think. He rummages through a sack and pulls out another tablet, this one covered in more compact writing. He grins and offers it like a treasure. It's a delivery manifest for a temple feast, dates garlic beer onions, and something that might translate to fermented yogurt loaf. The sheer volume recorded is staggering, and the purpose. Not just accounting, not just logistics, but status. See, part of why receipts mattered so much was prestige. If you were responsible for organizing a successful temple festival, you wanted everyone to know exactly how much beer you'd sourced and precisely how many sheep you had roasted. The more detailed your receipt, the more important you seemed. Some people kept their tablets as trophies, the Mesopotamian equivalent of framed diplomas or Yelp reviews. You stop beside a group of traders from Susa, gesturing excitedly with their hands clutching tablets in their robes. Foreigners, yes. But they've learned the local system, show the goods flash, the seal finalize the deal. You wonder how many languages these receipts crossed. Was there a moment where a trader had to pantomime a delivery because the words didn't line up? According to some fringe theories, that's exactly what cylinder seals helped resolve universal symbols, instantly recognizable bridging language gaps, before Rosetta had even carved a stone. You overhear one transaction gone wrong. A customer insists he paid last week. The seller points to a tablet. The man waves his arms. The seller shrugs, shows the seal. It's checkmate. The receipt says otherwise. No deal. Here's a delightful little quirk. Some ancient tablets even feature tiny clay envelopes. Yes, envelopes. A transaction would be sealed inside a clay case, which had to be broken to view. You could show the outer seal to prove legitimacy, but once broken, the receipt couldn't be reused. Primitive tamper-proofing at its finest. You picture a scribe carefully tucking a tablet into its clay casing, pressing his seal along the edge like an ancient wax stamp, somewhere between security protocol and ceremonial art. The merchant, noticing your interest, offers you a gift, a broken tablet fragment, its symbols faded but visible. Too old to sell, he jokes, but not too old to learn from. You turn it over in your palm. It's smooth, surprisingly warm from the sun. A receipt for something long lost. A transaction between people who are dust now, but their trade still recorded. You thank him and walk on, passing through the tangled market noise with your little artifact in hand. It occurs to you that these receipts, these unassuming clay slabs, may well outlive every paper invoice and digital payment record we've ever produced. Not flashy, not romantic, just useful, durable, honest. That was the point. No shouting, no ink, just the silent strength of baked earth and a little trust carved in wedges. The market begins to thin as the sun tilts westward and the heat folds itself into something more forgiving. You wander beyond the scent of roasting onions and toward the quieter edge of the city, where commerce isn't shouted, it's inscribed. Ahead stands a low building, windowless, guarded not by warriors, but by bureaucracy. This is the House of Tablets, not a name likely to inspire action movie franchises, but inside, oh, it's electric if your idea of excitement includes rows upon rows of clay cubbies, each packed with receipts. You push open the wooden door and step into the warm, musty scent of thousands of years of human mean counting. Shelves line the walls, stuffed with hardened tablets in neat rows, some tagged with tiny strings, others labeled with wedge marks that only a trained eye could decode. This essentially is the city archive, the cloud storage of Sumer, and you lucky sleeper get to poke around. A middle-aged clerk nods at you and gestures toward a table. She's not surprised to see a visitor. Record-keeping has a long history of being underappreciated until someone needs to prove that yes, in fact, those sheep were delivered 3 weeks ago, and yes, they were properly vaccinated with what we're not sure, but still. She sets a tablet before you, one of the flatter ones. Its surface is packed with symbols smaller and more cramped than the student slates from earlier. This one, she explains, is part of a monthly temple accounting. You squint at it. Rows of barley deliveries, each noted with location codes, quantities, and recipient names. It's not thrilling, but it is comforting, like watching someone's grocery list for the gods. You run your fingers over the edges. The weight of this tablet is odd heavier on one side. It must have dried unevenly. The clerk chuckles softly and tells you how they used to stack the tablets, like books sorted by date and category, livestock, grain, tools, even staff attendance. Yes, they tracked attendance. And if that doesn't scream bureaucracy with staying power, nothing does. Historians still argue how centralized these archives really were. Were there shared repositories across cities, standard codes, interregional document sharing systems? Or was it all just a mess of local conventions and overworked scribes trying not to smudge the inkless records? Your clerk friend waves you toward the back where rarer tablets are stored. These aren't daily receipts, but special contracts, longer inscriptions with more legal phrasing. Marriage arrangements, land disputes, even accusations of theft, all dutifully recorded, sealed, and sometimes even witnessed. One tablet catches your eye. It includes 3 seals. Not 1, not 2, 3. Apparently, it recorded a land lease involving a temple, a farmer, and a goat herder. You imagine the back and forth negotiations, but I promised him 10 goats, and the final exhausted agreement immortalized in clay. And there's a curious fringe detail. This receipt also includes a tiny drawing, a pictograph of a bird, not a standard part of the system. Could it have been a personal signature, a warning, a joke historians don't know? But you can picture the scribe chuckling as he added it, perhaps to annoy a rival clerk or amuse a bored client. The clerk lets you flip through a few more records carefully, of course. One tablet records the labor payment for building a canal segment. It includes rations for the workers' bricks, ordered tools loaned, and the agreed date of completion. Delays, probably, but the paperwork was flawless. It's here you begin to realize how receipts weren't just about trade. They were also about infrastructure. Roads, temples, canals, even city walls, none of them could exist without tracking who was supposed to bring what when and how much they'd be paid. And all of that was written down in triplicate on things that weighed as much as small melons. You glance at the clerk again. She's back at her table, gently brushing dust off a fragment. Her movements are slow, deliberate. You wonder how many hours she's spent here cradling other people's promises. The silence in the room deepens. It's not empty. It's full of whispering facts, etched by people long forgotten. And yet, you feel their presence, not as conquerors or kings, but as warriors, planners, and receipt keepers. You can almost hear one muttering, "Wait, did we write down how many jars of oil were delivered? No. Oh, Enki, help us." Outside, the wind shifts, whistling through narrow alleys as if calling you onward. But you hesitate a moment longer, running your finger over one last tablet, a personal record of a debt repaid. It reads simply, Omar returned the borrowed ox on the second day of the full moon. Agreement fulfilled. No epic ending, no grand reward, just closure. And honestly, that's enough. You step out of the house of tablets and squint into the soft afternoon light, the cool dimness of bureaucracy giving way to the warm lull of late-day trade. The streets are quieter now, fewer deals, more gossip, less shouting, more chewing. It's the Mesopotamian version of post-lunch slowdown. You follow a row of half-shaded awnings, past pottery stands and idle donkeys, until you come upon a structure with walls painted in rich ochre tones, faded but proud. A community hall of sorts. And it smells intriguing, like herbs and wet clay and something faintly garlicky. You step inside, where a group of scribes in training are huddled around low tables, practicing inscription techniques under the directions of a grizzled old man with a stylus behind his ear. One of the young scribes looks up and beckons you in. You're not surprised anymore. Hospitality seems to be the local default. He nudges a tablet your way and points to the first line. It's a sample training receipt documenting the sale of 3 jars of sesame oil to the temple cook. An exercise in everyday record keeping. You sit beside him, watching as his reed stylus dips into a fresh slab of clay. His form is meticulous, almost meditative. You begin to understand for these scribes, receipts aren't just about math. They're about language order and trust, a kind of civic poetry. Your companion turns to another tablet, this one more detailed. It lists a breakdown of workers' rations on a city project. Every line tallies items, barley dates beer, always beer, and a mysterious grain called emmer. You trace the markings with a fingertip and smile at a small error scratched out and corrected evidence that even the best scribes had off days. Here's a scholarly curiosity. Some receipts were duplicated and stored in both the temple and the merchant's home. Redundancy, yes, but also accountability. If there was a dispute, you'd produce both tablets and compare them. It's basically a clay-based two-factor authentication. Your scribe friend gestures at another pile receipts from traveling merchants. These are rougher, less elegant, but no less important. Some are barely thumb-sized, just enough to record a name, an amount, and a date. Others are huge, covered in fine script, and bearing the official seal of a governor or priest. You're told that itinerant traders often traveled with their own clay, ready to press transactions into permanence wherever a deal occurred. Imagine that hauling not only goods, but your own mobile record-keeping kit. A portable bureaucracy. Historians still debate how standardized these mobile receipts were. Did distant towns recognize each other's symbols? Were there roaming notaries, or just local trust? Some evidence suggests merchant guilds may have helped enforce cross-city trade laws. Others believe it was all much messier, a trade web held together by luck loyalty and the occasional priestly intervention. As you lean in to observe a more elaborate inscription, your scribe nods proudly. This one records the settlement of a tax obligation paid not in coins which don't exist yet, but in labor. The taxpayer, unable to provide barley, agreed to dig irrigation trenches for 6 days instead. The receipt documents it, all his name, his family lineage, and the dates he worked. This is where things get surprisingly modern. Receipts didn't just show what was traded, they shaped what could be traded. Debt, labor, future service, even reputation could be transcribed. In a way, these tablets were early engines of credit and obligation. If you had a good record, you were more likely to strike favorable deals. If your name showed up on too many unpaid receipts, good luck getting someone to loan you a goat. At this point, someone brings in a small cup of something warm and fragrant, herbal a bit grassy. You sip, it's calming. The perfect pairing for watching clay dry. Literally. The head instructor finally shuffles over. He plucks up one of the student tablets and snorts. This barley count looks like a goat stepped on it. He mutters, then grins and tousles the scribe's hair. His tunic is stained with dust and old ink, and his belt holds not one but 3 styluses. You get the impression he's forgotten more about receipts than most people ever learn. He tells you a favorite story, half serious, half joke, about a scribe who recorded a shipment of 25 sheep and accidentally wrote 25 husbands. The tablet went unnoticed until a wedding feast ended in bureaucratic disaster. The sheep were eventually located, but the marriages, not so much. He chuckles to himself and tells you, always double-check your wedges. You sit there a little longer, listening to the quiet scrape of styluses against clay, the low hum of focused labor, the occasional whispered joke. It's oddly hypnotic. Here the act of writing is less about art and more about survival. Receipts keep the world running. They prove things happened. They keep lies at bay, or at least try to. And most of all, they give the future something to hold on to. You smile, stretch your legs, and thank the scribes for their time. As you leave, one of them presses a fresh, blank tablet into your hands, in case you want to record something he says. You look down at the smooth clay, blank, open, ready. And in that moment, you understand something deeply comforting. Every receipt is a story waiting to be told. The clay tablet feels cool in your hands. As you step back into the sun, its unmarked surface still slightly pliable. It's just a lump, really ordinary brown and fragile. But you now know it's more powerful than it looks. It could become anything, a list, a contract, a confession, even a love note. If someone's brave enough to try. The streets of Ur are quieter now. The shadows grow longer, and the markets hum instead of roar. You head toward the river again, following the scent of baked earth and the soft slap of sandals on stone. But before you reach the water, you stop short. Something's caught your eye, a cluster of stalls you hadn't noticed earlier, arranged around a modest courtyard, shaded with woven palm mats. There's something peculiar here. No merchants shouting, no wares on full display. Just a slow dance of people handing over tiny clay tablets and receiving items in return. It's not bartering. It's not coin trade. It's something else entirely. A woman greets you with a soft nod. She wears a simple linen robe and carries a bundle of rolled mats under one arm. Credit market, she explains. Temple approved. You blink. A credit market in 2000 BCE. Yes. Apparently, even 4,000 years ago, people were already figuring out how to shop without paying right away. You trail her inside and see a low bench stacked with standard-sized tablets. These are receipts, but not from completed trades. These are IOUs carefully inscribed and backed by temple officials. You're looking at Mesopotamian store credit. The process goes like this. A farmer needs a new plow. He doesn't have the barley or labor to pay today. So he visits this courtyard, explains his need, and gets a scribe to record a debt tablet. The scribe seals it with the farmer's cylinder seal, notes the due date and collateral, maybe a goat or a pledge of service, and gives a copy to both parties. The plow is handed over. The receipt is stored here in the credit stall. The farmer now has until harvest to settle up. And here's the twist. Some of these receipts are transferable. You can hand one over to someone else, say to a potter, in exchange for dishes, and now they become the creditor. These little tablets move from hand to hand, marking invisible lines of trust across the city. Historians still argue whether this counts as money. It isn't coinage, there are no precious metals, no universal symbols, but it functions like a promissory note, and in many ways it's more sophisticated. There's evidence that even temple workers were sometimes paid in redeemable credit tablets, which they could then spend elsewhere. You sit by a low stone wall and watch a scribe inscribe one of these temple credits. His stylus moves swiftly with practiced elegance. He's recording a rental agreement for 2 oxen lent out for 6 weeks. The borrower promises to return them in good health or replace them at full value. A priest oversees the transaction, murmuring a blessing as the tablet is sealed. A goat bleats nearby. It's tethered to a post, eyeing you suspiciously. You wonder if he's collateral. You hope not. He looks like he has aspirations. You lean back, letting the sounds of this quiet marketplace lull you. Clay clicks against clay. A woman hums as she bundles up lentils. Somewhere a reed flute sighs through the courtyard. One merchant comes by, carrying a basket of fish wrapped in wet leaves. She pauses to tell you her favorite receipt story. A man once traded 2 jars of date wine in exchange for a set of flutes, but forgot to include the due date. 10 years later, the musician returned asking for the payment. The man's descendants were baffled, and the matter ended up in temple arbitration. The court ruled the wine undrinkable by now, and instead issued a new debt tablet for 2 sheep. Justice maybe. Creative accounting definitely. You ask if people ever tried to forge these tablets. The merchant shrugs. Some did. But forgery's harder when the evidence is baked. She gestures toward a fire pit where rejected or proven false receipts are destroyed, cracked, and blackened, never to be reused. And here's your quirky tidbit. For the day, some wealthy merchants kept receipt dogs. Not actual accountants with wagging tails, but trained dogs who could identify their master's scent and guard or retrieve tablet satchels. One tale tells of a dog who returned home after its owner died in a dust storm, carrying the sealed bag of debt receipts in its mouth. That dog honored with a tiny statue near the temple gate. As the sun lowers, the credit courtyard begins to pack up. Receipts are tied in bundles and placed into small baskets, which are then taken to the temple's ledger house for official tallying. The woman who first welcomed you waves a fond farewell, slipping a tiny thumb-sized clay token into your palm. Just for fun, she says. You owe me a story. You glance down. It's a joke tablet. The inscription reads, 1 goat, redeemable upon next full moon. If it dances, you smile. Bureaucracy has always had its comedians. And as you walk away, the tablet still warm from her hand, You think somewhere between trust and clay, humans built something oddly enduring. Not wealth, not even law, but the habit of recording our promises and the comfort of being able to point to a squiggle in baked earth and say, "See, I was there. I mattered." The air cools further as twilight falls over Ur, and you find yourself drawn to the city's quieter corners, where life hums softly rather than shouts. You wander past a cluster of mud brick homes, their doorways open, inviting gentle smells of cooking and washing. It's here that you come across something less expected, a small private archive personal records kept by a merchant family. The door creaks open, and a kindly elder gestures you inside. You sit on a woven mat beside a low table, strewn with tablets, some worn smooth with handling, others freshly baked. This is the personal side of receipt keeping, not temple stores or markets, but family ledgers chronicling debts, loans, and promises made within and beyond the household. He picks up one tablet, pointing out its carefully inscribed lines. It details a loan of silver to a traveling trader with an agreement to repay after the next caravan return. A small sketch of a camel is doodled in the corner, perhaps to mark the trade route or just a moment of scribal whimsy. The elder chuckles softly as he shows you a fragment of a tablet that's rather unusual. It's a receipt for the rental of a donkey for a wedding procession. What makes it special is the note at the bottom. The donkey was reluctant and required frequent encouragement. You imagine the chaos of a stubborn donkey at a joyous celebration. Some things never change. You listen as the elder explains that keeping these records was a way of maintaining trust across generations. Family members could dispute accounts centuries later. Okay, maybe not centuries, but certainly decades. In that sense, receipts were a kind of social glue binding relationships through paperless time. One fascinating debate among historians is whether these personal ledgers influenced the development of more formal record keeping in temples and palaces, or vice versa. Some suggest that the sophisticated temple archives inspired families to mimic the system on a smaller scale. Others argue that personal record keeping was the grassroots root of all Sumerian bureaucracy. Your host offers you a small cup of date wine, the sweetness lingering on your tongue, as he shares a curious tale about a receipt lost and found. A merchant once misplaced an important tablet, a loan note worth several sheep. The tablet was accidentally baked a second time and turned into a kind of clay brick indistinguishable from the building materials around it. Years later, a builder uncovered it during repairs, and the merchant recovered his debt, albeit long after the original loan. The room fills with soft laughter at the irony a receipt transformed into a brick. You consider the metaphor the way history itself can become layered and hidden, yet still hold stories waiting to be uncovered. Outside, a gentle breeze stirs the reed mats, carrying the distant sound of children playing. The elder's smile softens, and he tells you that for all the complexity of their receipts, Mesopotamians understood something fundamental, that life is a ledger of moments each recorded or forgotten, but all part of the unfolding narrative. As the evening deepens, you thank your host and step back into the cooling streets, the weight of the unbaked clay tablet in your pocket, reminding you of promises made and kept, or sometimes lost to time. The night has deepened, and the city's sounds have softened to a gentle murmur, the occasional bark of a dog, the whisper of the river against the bank, the distant call of a night bird. You walk toward a small temple near the city center where soft torchlight flickers against carved stone reliefs. Inside, the cool air smells faintly of incense and baked clay. This temple dedicated to Nabu, the god of wisdom and writing, holds some of the oldest and most carefully guarded receipts in the city. Here, scribes are not just recorders, they are keepers of divine order, ensuring that every transaction is witnessed by the gods themselves. You settle onto a low bench, watching as a senior scribe gently wipes the surface of a large tablet before beginning to write. His stylus moves with deliberate grace, crafting each wedge with care. The tablet is a record of temple offerings, grain oil textiles, cataloged meticulously to guarantee fair distribution among priest workers and the needy. What's fascinating here is the role of ritual in receipt keeping. Each transaction was accompanied by prayers and blessings. The temple was both a bank and a sacred space. Before a receipt was sealed and stored, it was blessed, ensuring the gods would witness and enforce the agreement. Breaking a receipt was seen as breaking a sacred vow. The scribe tells you about a curious practice sometimes. When disputes arose, the disputants would swear oaths upon their receipts, invoking divine punishment if they were lying. In some cases, the tablets themselves were ceremonially broken or buried as part of these oaths, a way of sealing the promise forever. Historians debate how much the divine aspect influenced everyday business. Did ordinary merchants truly believe the gods policed their debts? Or was it a social tool, a way to discourage cheating through the power of shared belief? Probably a bit of both. You listen as the scribe recounts a story of a receipt involving a shipment of finely woven wool. The merchant promised to deliver it within a month, but the wool never arrived. The receipt, sealed with a divine blessing, became evidence in a temple trial. The verdict: the merchant was forced to repay double in grain and provide an additional offering to Nabu. Justice through clay and prayer. Outside, you hear the soft footfalls of a temple assistant carrying a basket of clay tablets for drying. The rhythmic clatter is soothing, like the steady beat of a slow drum. As you prepare to leave, the senior scribe presses a small tablet into your hand. It reads simply, "May your promises be true and your debts light." You tuck it safely away, feeling the weight not just of clay, but of centuries of trust, faith, and human connection. The sun is just beginning to peek over the horizon as you find yourself strolling along the banks of the Euphrates once more. The air is crisp, carrying the faint scent of morning dew mixed with the earthy aroma of river mud. Fishermen prepare their nets in silence, and the city is waking up slowly, wrapped in a soft, golden haze. Today, your attention is drawn to a group of craftsmen working near a kiln. Their hands are stained with soot and clay as they shape small tablets, carefully inscribing the latest transactions before the tablets are baked to permanence. You watch a young apprentice struggling with his stylus, the grooves of cuneiform seeming to dance and blur under his unsteady hand. The master craftsman leans over and smiles, gently correcting the apprentice's strokes with patience. "Every line matters," he says. "The smallest wedge can change a promise into a lie." This scene is a reminder that these ancient receipts were not just about numbers and debts. They were works of art, expressions of trust, crafted in delicate strokes. The scribe's skill was a valued trade in itself, requiring years of study. You learn that scribes began training as children, often in temple schools, memorizing hundreds of signs before ever touching a stylus. Some even practiced by inscribing on soft clay balls, which were then broken open to reveal their mistakes, a kind of ancient pop quiz. Here's a fun aside. Some tablets show tiny doodles in the margins, sketches of animals, humorous caricatures of neighbors, or even cryptic jokes that only fellow scribes might understand. One particularly cheeky tablet shows a goat chasing a scribe, its hooves leaving a trail of cuneiform symbols behind. Historians still debate whether these doodles were simply boredom relief or a coded language between scribes. It's tempting to imagine them sharing a laugh across millennia. As the craftsmen load fresh tablets into the kiln, you hear stories about the innovation of sealing tablets within clay envelopes. These envelopes contained the receipt itself, but were broken only to verify the transaction, adding a layer of security against tampering. Some even had cylinder seals pressed into the soft clay to guarantee authenticity. Interestingly, some sealed envelopes have survived with their contents intact, offering historians rare glimpses into the complexity of ancient commerce. The apprentice finishes his tablet and hands it off for baking. You take a moment to feel the warmth of the kiln, imagining how this heat transforms soft clay into a lasting record. As you move away from the kiln, a breeze carries the scent of baked bread and freshly cut reeds. You pause to watch a fisherman cast his net the sun, now casting long shadows across the water's shimmering surface. There's a quiet beauty here, a world bound by promises, both fragile and eternal, etched in clay and preserved by fire. The city's heartbeat slows as the midday heat wraps around you like a thick blanket. You duck into a shaded alley, the walls of mud brick rising on either side, softening the sunlight to a gentle amber glow. Here, tucked away from the bustling markets and temples, you find a quieter story, the story of women and receipts. It might surprise you to learn that women in ancient Mesopotamia were not just silent figures behind veils. Many were active in commerce, managing households that included farms, shops, or even workshops. And yes, they kept receipts too. You meet a merchant's wife, named Enheduanna, no relation to the famous poetess, but the name feels fitting. She carefully handles a bundle of tablets detailing transactions for Woolsale's barley purchases and loans given to neighbors. These aren't just business records. They're personal documents reflecting a woman's role in the financial life of her family and community. What's even more fascinating is that women sometimes acted as guarantors for loans or witnesses to agreements roles that gave them surprising influence in a society often assumed to be strictly patriarchal. Enheduanna shares a tale about a receipt for a shipment of fragrant oils destined for a temple ritual. The tablet includes a note specifying that the oils must be of the highest quality, or the buyer could return them without penalty. This kind of quality control shows a sophistication in trade agreements that might feel very modern. Historians still debate the extent of women's economic power in Mesopotamia. Some argue that many women were restricted to domestic roles, while others find abundant evidence of female agency in trade and property management. Either way, these receipts reveal a vibrant and nuanced social fabric. As you listen, You notice a small tablet that looks out of place, a receipt for a basket of dates signed with a woman's unique seal rather than a man's. It's an intimate reminder that women's signatures quite literally made a mark in this early world of written commerce. A curious bit of trivia: some women commissioned specially crafted cylinder seals featuring symbols of fertility and protection, tiny rolling artworks that left impressions on tablets, and clay envelopes serving as both signature and talisman. You watch as Enheduanna seals a fresh tablet with her own mark. The seal presses smoothly into the soft clay, leaving behind an intricate pattern of spirals and stars. It feels like a quiet declaration: I am here and I keep my promises. The alley grows warmer as the sun climbs higher, and you step back into the hum of the city, carrying with you a new appreciation for the silent but essential roles women played in the ledger of history. The afternoon light stretches long across the bustling market square as you find yourself drawn into the everyday rhythms of trade and barter. The clatter of wooden carts, the murmur of haggling voices, and the sense of spices and baked goods swirl around you. Here amidst the crowd, you glimpse another crucial role of receipts, facilitating credit in a cashless economy. In Mesopotamia, coins as we know them didn't exist yet. So much of the economy ran on promises and trust. Receipts became a kind of currency, allowing merchants and farmers to extend credit and settle debts long before silver or gold coins came into play. You watch a grain merchant, old and weathered, exchange a sealed clay receipt with a pottery seller. This tablet represents a promise the grain merchant will deliver barley after the next harvest, and the pottery seller in turn will provide pots on credit. The exchange is silent but binding. One of the quirks of this system was the risk of default, and here's where receipts acted as both contracts and deterrents. A missing or broken receipt could lead to long disputes, and sometimes the matter ended in temple arbitration. Historians debate the extent to which these early credit systems influenced later monetary developments. Did the reliance on receipts and credit delay the invention of coins, or did these systems lay the groundwork for more complex financial instruments? The truth is still murky, but it's clear that Mesopotamian receipts were more than mere notes. They were the backbone of an evolving economy. You hear a tale of a merchant who cleverly used multiple receipts to juggle debts, sometimes confusing creditors enough to buy time. This ancient version of creative accounting shows that even 5,000 years ago, people were trying to outsmart the system. Despite these complexities, the system generally worked, supported by the social expectation that debts would be repaid to maintain honor and community standing. Receipts inscribed on clay and baked hard served as tangible proof of these agreements. As you wander through the market, you see a boy playing with a small clay tablet, tracing cuneiform marks with a stick in the dirt. It's a gentle reminder that these symbols were learned, practiced, and lived every day. You pause by a stall selling reed pens and clay tablets, imagining yourself as a young scribe beginning your training, learning the delicate art of recording promises, debts, and exchanges. Each tablet a step deeper into the shared story of commerce. The sun begins its slow descent, casting long shadows over the market. You tuck away the image of a city held together by the fragile yet enduring bonds of clay tablets and trust. The sun sinks lower, and the soft hues of dusk wash over the city, lending a golden glow to the winding streets and bustling stalls. You wander toward the city's outskirts, where open fields stretch out, and farmers are beginning to tend their evening chores. Here you discover another unexpected place, where receipts mattered the rural countryside, where farmers and landowners kept track of labor rents and crop shares. These transactions were often less formal than in the city, but still required careful recording, sometimes on small portable tablets that could be carried from field to farmhouse. You watch as a farmer inscribes a receipt for a portion of his barley harvest promised to a neighboring landowner in exchange for using their oxen during plowing season. The tablet is rougher, simpler than the finely crafted urban ones, but no less important. It carries the weight of livelihoods and community trust. An intriguing detail emerges: some receipts included weather notes or comments about crop quality, hinting at an early attempt to contextualize agreements within the unpredictability of nature. One tablet records that the harvest was light due to spring floods, a kind of ancient excuse note. Historians still debate how widespread literacy was in rural areas and whether farmers wrote their own receipts or relied on local scribes traveling between villages. Either way, the existence of these tablets suggests a network of record-keeping extending far beyond city walls. You learn about the practice of sharing receipts during festivals or communal gatherings, times when debts were reconciled and new agreements made under the watchful eyes of neighbors and elders. This social accountability was vital in a world without modern banks or contracts. There's also a charming anecdote about a farmer who accidentally recorded the same debt twice on two tablets, causing confusion that was only resolved after the tablets were compared side by side during a village meeting. The dispute ended in laughter, proving that even thousands of years ago, people could get tangled in paperwork. As night approaches, you feel a deep connection to this landscape of early promises, each receipt a whisper from a life lived fully in a world balanced between survival and cooperation. You breathe in the cool evening air, imagining the slow turning of seasons and the steady beat of human stories recorded in clay and trust. Night has fully embraced the city now, and you find yourself drawn to a quiet courtyard where a final batch of tablets rests cooling from the day's kiln firing. The air is thick with the scent of baked earth, mingled with the faint aroma of date palms and distant fires. Here you reflect on the profound legacy of these ancient receipts, their humble clay surfaces carrying the weight of countless human interactions, promises made and kept, sometimes broken, but always remembered. You recall the earliest moments of writing in Mesopotamia, born from the practical need to document trade and loans, and how this seemingly mundane act sparked one of humanity's greatest inventions, recorded history itself. The story comes full circle as you consider the enduring nature of receipts, not just as records, but as social contracts, religious vows, personal keepsakes, and even art. A fascinating tidbit: some tablets were deliberately inscribed with errors or jokes to catch the attention of auditors, or simply to amuse those who would read them later, reminders that these ancient scribes had a sense of humor too. Historians still ponder how much these records influenced later systems of law and accounting, tracing a lineage from clay tablets to modern ledgers, contracts, and digital receipts. The echoes of Mesopotamian commerce ripple through time in every purchase and promise you make today. As you hold a final tablet, you feel the smoothness of the baked clay beneath your fingers, warm with history and human touch. You imagine the scribes and merchants who once held this very form of record, their lives woven into the fabric of civilization through these small, endearing tokens. You breathe deeply, letting the quiet wisdom of these ancient marks settle in your mind, a gentle reminder of how the simplest tools can shape the course of humanity. With the night wrapping softly around you, you feel a calm sense of connection, not just to Mesopotamia, but to the ongoing story of human trust and memory. Now, as you settle deeper into your pillow, the steady rhythm of ancient lives unfolds softly in your mind. The quiet clay tablets, the careful strokes of cuneiform, the whispered promises and gentle oaths, they form a tapestry of human experience, fragile yet unbreakable. You might imagine the cool night air of ancient Mesopotamia, the faint rustle of palm leaves, and the soft murmur of the Euphrates in the distance carrying stories across time. Feel the slow, comforting pulse of history as it lulls you, a gentle reminder that even the smallest marks can leave lasting impressions. Let your thoughts drift on the warmth of baked earth and the careful hands of scribes long gone whose work still reaches you tonight. There is a calm power in connection, in promises kept and stories preserved. So breathe slowly, sink deeper into comfort, and let the echoes of ancient receipts carry you peacefully into sleep. The world may be vast, but the bonds of trust and memory are quietly eternal.